A diplomatic dash for safety as embassy staff are evacuated from Sudan. British nationals were airlifted out last night, but concern remains for others still stuck there.
It's harrowing. Every time you speak to them, there's shelling in the background, there's bullets in the background, every single time.
Also tonight, Labour no longer. The MP Diane Abbott is suspended from the party following her comments about Jewish people. Little alarm over that alert, but today's test failed on some phones. And running to schedule, the London Marathon finally returns to its spring slot.
This is ITV News with Paul Brand.
Good evening. There are growing concerns tonight for UK nationals stuck in Sudan after British diplomats and their families were evacuated from the country overnight. Embassy staff were airlifted to safety outside the capital, Khartoum, where fighting is entering a third week. Here, the Foreign Secretary said diplomats had become a particular target for violence as other British expats still await their rescue. Neil Connery has the latest.
Evacuated from Sudan's terror, hundreds of French citizens and other Europeans preparing to fly out from Khartoum on French military planes. Overnight, British diplomats and their families were also evacuated in a British military operation as fighting intensifies.
In response to escalating violence in Khartoum and because of specific threats and violence directed towards diplomats in Khartoum, we have taken the decision to temporarily close the British embassy.
At least 500 people have already been killed in the violent battle for power in Khartoum between the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and Sudan's regular army. Now that British diplomats have gone, British nationals who remain in Sudan are desperately seeking safety. Saeed's family have been trapped in Khartoum. His sister was interrupted by gunfire as she gave this update.
Airstrikes are terrifying. They will kill indiscriminately, and the RSF are kind of going into... Do you hear that? So that's basically what it's been like, and then every once in a while there'll be like an explosion.
His family are now on a bus heading for Egypt.
It's harrowing. Every time you speak to them, there's shelling in the background, there's bullets in the background, every single time. It seems to me, and I'm no expert, that if everyone is making a big fuss of evacuation now, it tends to mean that the situation is going to get worse.
More military planes are now preparing to evacuate foreign nationals as the race to escape the violence steps up.
And Neil is here with me now. Neil, what hope tonight of an end to this violence?
Well, as the Foreign Secretary made clear today, the quickest way, Paul, to calm this situation and protect British nationals still in Sudan tonight is to secure an immediate ceasefire. But I think given Sudan's recent complex history, that is going to be difficult. Tonight, the Foreign Office says that it's working with all our relevant international partners to find the quickest and easiest route to evacuate British nationals. Their safety continues to be our utmost priority, they say. But if you're one of those people tonight, what you desperately want is a seat on a plane, and it's not clear when that's coming because of the difficulties on the ground. Because of what is happening on the situation and the urgency of all of this, I suspect we are going to see more scenes like we've witnessed today in the days ahead.
All right, Neil, thanks very much for that update. The politician Diane Abbott has been suspended as a Labour MP after she suggested that Jewish people don't suffer from racism in the same way as black people. She's retracted the remarks and apologised, saying her letter in a Sunday newspaper was an initial draft. But having promised to end its troubles over anti-Semitism, her party's announced an immediate investigation. Amy Lewis has more.
As a Labour veteran, Diane Abbott knew this is a toxic issue for the party.
Have you been trying to silence victims of anti-Semitism, Mr Corbyn?
Anti-Semitism dogged Labour during the leadership of her close ally Jeremy Corbyn, and now she's been suspended by a party wanting to stamp out any suggestion it's anti-Jewish. She wrote, "Irish, Jewish and traveller people undoubtedly experience prejudice. This is similar to racism, and the two words are often used as if they are interchangeable. It is true that many types of white people with points of difference, such as redheads, can experience this prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism."
Well, I think it's this idea there's some hierarchy of racism and there's some hierarchy of hate, and somehow, you know, the hate and the racism that's undoubtedly been visited upon black people, both in this country and indeed in many other countries around the world for centuries. That's terrible, that's appalling, but, you know, why set that up in competition against the atrocities of the Holocaust?
Concerns that anti-Semitism was on the rise during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership led to the party being found guilty of acting unlawfully by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. The current leader, Sir Keir Starmer, suspended Corbyn from the party and last month blocked him from standing as a Labour candidate at the next general election. The party say Diane Abbott's comments were deeply offensive and wrong. She has apologised, adding that errors arose when an initial draft was sent. She will now sit in the Commons as an independent MP, pending an investigation. Amy Lewis, ITV News.
Today's trial run of a new emergency alert system failed the test on some phones. Millions of mobiles did ring out across the country from just before 3 p.m. this afternoon, and in future, the alarm's designed to warn people of life-threatening situations. But the government says it will learn from the drill after many phones sat in silence. Rebecca Barry explains.
At a Sainsbury's in the southwest, it didn't stop the weekly supermarket shop.
Play has been paused just for the emergency test alert. It will resume straight afterwards.
At the World Snooker Championship, it tested the players' patience. With some confusion at the crucible as the alerts seemed to go off at different times.
It might be an idea if we all just switch our phones off for the rest of this session.
It interrupted Sunday lunch at this pub. But the mobile network 3 says some of its customers didn't receive the alert, and it's working with the government to resolve it.
There was almost a sense of excitement here as most people's phones went off. Others were disappointed that theirs didn't. Mine received the alert. It reads, "This is a test. In a real emergency, follow the instructions to keep yourself and others safe."
If something really did happen, why wouldn't I have gotten an alert?
Do you find it reassuring or worrying?
I'd like to know if there was going to be a bomb alert and we needed to get under the table or go to the basement or something.
Eventually, the system will warn people of life-threatening events like a flood or wildfire. The Deputy Prime Minister denies it's an example of an overreaching nanny state.
Well, countries across the world, for example, I think of the United States, Japan and elsewhere, have an emergency alert system. It's just a test, but in future, this could be the sound that saves your life.
The government insists it's effectively completed the UK's biggest public communications exercise and will now learn any lessons. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Moving on to football now, and for the first time ever, the FA Cup final will be a Manchester derby. In tonight's semi-final at Wembley, United squeezed past Brighton in a dramatic penalty shootout after the match had finished goalless even after extra time. Chris Scudder was watching.
The pain of defeat. Brighton had never won at Wembley before, and this hurt. Whatever they threw at United goalkeeper David De Gea, acrobatics kept them out. Brighton had lost their only ever FA Cup final to United 40 years ago, and how they wanted to go one better this time. But they just couldn't score. Desperate attempts to breach United's defence fell just short. So it went to penalties, a time for cool heads amid massive tension.
Good penalty.
And the first 12, 6 each, were all scored. Brighton's Solly March took the 13th.
So the best scoring season of his career, Solly March. And he's placed it over the bar. unlucky 13th penalty of the shootout.
Step forward, Victor Lindelof to be the victor and hero. For the first time ever, it will be an all-Manchester FA Cup final derby on June the 3rd. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And finally tonight, it was a record-breaking London Marathon, one of firsts and lasts among the 48,000 expected to have crossed the finish line. Kenya's Kelvin Kiptum finished the course with a time never seen before in the capital, but there was also a final victory lap for one of the UK's greatest ever runners. Callum Watkinson reports.
The tens of thousands who gathered to run in the rain in central London had reasons for being here as varied as the costumes that they wore. But when it came to headline heroics, it was the elite athletes today who made the running.
He's going to win the London Marathon. It's a new course record for Kiptum.
Kenyan Kelvin Kiptum clocked the fastest London time ever and the second fastest marathon the world has ever seen. Ethiopian-born Dutch woman Sifan Hassan was written off by commentators 1 hour in.
She needs to stop. Somebody needs to give her some advice.
But with the finish in sight, the Olympic 10,000-metre champion's track pedigree came roaring down the Mall. Her first ever marathon, a victory and a shock to many, not least to herself.
I'm not even to finish the race. So I think maybe that's why I ran better. I was like happy to every kilometer. I'm like, oh, thanks God.
And a day of firsts for two young athletes was one of finality for Sir Mo Farah.
Thanks for everything, Mo.
It was not his fastest marathon, but as he confirmed afterwards, it was his last.
Last 2 years I have struggled with my body and not been able to do what I wanted to do in terms of run 120 miles week in, week out, 3 sessions. If the body is not responding and you can't do it, you know it's time to call it.
There was the full complement of bright costumes and charity runners chasing records of their own. But at the elite level, there was a sense here today of a baton being passed from one generation to the next. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
Amazing stuff. And that's it for this evening. There'll be updates throughout the night on ITVX, of course. But from all the team here, thank you for watching and we wish you a very good evening.